in this video, we'll look at how to work with text files in Android. So we're going to see how to write to a text file and read the data back from a text file. So what I've done is to create a new application called Text Files Video 2019, and I have created the main activities layout file. So on the main activity, right at the top, what I did was to change the constraint layout to a linear layout and set the orientation to vertical. I have then dragged in under text two of the plain text edit texts. I've given them the hints enter name and enter surname, and I have dragged in under common two buttons where I've just set the background property, you can see there, to the primary color, and then the text color on both I've set to white. Then I've also included a text view there. There's the text view. Drag the text view to the screen and basically just centered it using the gravity property, center horizontal. Now I've given IDs to all of these, so you can see the IDs there. That one is ET name, ET surname, btn add, btn save, and then tb data. So if we quickly go to the main activity, I've declared all those, and then I have linked them up all in coding. The only thing that we still need to do here is to set up those two buttons. So let's start with btn add, and I'm going to say btn add.set onClick listener new onClick listener. That's to set up the onClick listener for the button, and then let's do the same for btn save. Set the onClick listener new onClick listener. So now we've got onClick listeners for the add button and for the save button, and now everything is fine. So what we want to do in this activity is to let the user enter a name and a surname. When we click on the add button, that person must be added as a person object to an array list and then shown in this text view at the bottom. And then when we get that working, we can then try and save the data that's in that array list to a file. So for this to be able to work, let's go and create a new custom class. So on your Java folder in the package, you're going to say new Java class. Right click, new Java class. Let's call this class person. So this will be a basic person class where we only have a private string name and a private string surname. Now, these are the only two values we're going to use for this person class. So we're going to ask the user there, what's your name and your surname? And that's the only two things we're going to save about that person. So then just right click and say generate and create the constructor, selecting the two and saying OK. The next one, right click, generate getters and setters, select both of them and say OK. So you don't need to type all of this out. You can just go and right click and say generate, and it will generate the constructor as well as the getters and the setters for your name and your surname field. Now let's go back to the main activity and let's create an array list here. So I'm going to use an array list to save my data, and it will basically hold person objects, and let's call it people. Now I can initialize that by just saying people equals new array list, and the type of the array list will be person, although that's not needed there. You can add it there. So there's the people array list. It has been created. It can only accept person objects. Now let's go to the add button. If the user then clicks on the add button, we first want to see if he actually entered any data there as the name and the surname. So how do we do that? Firstly, if etName .getText .toString .is empty. So if that one is empty, or et surname .getText .toString .is empty. So if either one of those two are empty, which means either one of the two edit texts are empty, we'll show a toast there to the user to say, please enter all fields. So what will the else be? That will be the user actually typed something there, and now we can go and create this new person object. So we can say person equals new person. And now if you look at the constructor that we have in the person class, we need to pass in the name and then the surname. So where we will get the name? Well, that we'll get from etName.getText .toString, and remember you can use the trim method. And then the second argument will be from etSurname.getText person.toString.trim. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating a new person object, passing in the name and the surname what the user entered. So we'll get the name here from the ET name edit text, and we'll get the surname from the ET surname edit text. So now we've got this new person object, and we want to go and add this to the people array list. So we're going to add that new person object into the people array list. So every time we click on the add button, we're adding a new person to the people array list. And now I want to call a method here, set text to text view. Now you'll see this method doesn't exist, that's why it's totally in red. So you're going to click on it, say Alt Enter, say create the method, and you can use the bottom one. It must be in the main activity. So there you can see the method gets created for you automatically, and we want to do something now in this method to set the text that we currently have in the database to the text view. So where's the text view? It's this one that we want to set the text to. So let's see how we're going to do this one. I'm going to start here to say string text, and then just set the text to nothing. And then I'm going to run a for loop to run through every element inside of my array list. So I'm going to say people.size and then I++. I'm going to run through, I less than people.size. So we will run through every element inside of the people array list. That's got all my person objects now. And for every one of them inside of that array list, we want to add some text to this variable. So we're going to say text equals text plus, or the exact same thing you can also do by saying text plus equals. So I find the top one easier to understand. So while I'm explaining, I use this one. So it's text equals text plus. Now we want to add to that. Remember, we start with empty text, and now we add to that empty text. So we're going to go to the people array list. We're going to get the object at a specific position where we are currently in the loop, and then call get name. That will have the name of the person. Then we can have a space there and go to people.getI again. That gets the object. .getSurname gets the surname. And then I want to add a new line character there, so that every time it goes to a new line and then show the next person on the new line. So it will keep on adding text now to this text variable, and the text it's going to add will be one of the persons inside of the people array list. Right, and then if that is done, we have all our data in this variable called text, and we can just go to our text view called TV data, and we can set the text to this text that we just created. So let's quickly run this and see what we've got so far. Right, so there the app is running. So let's just add a few names there. I'm going to add Chuck, and let's say Norris there. Now look at what happens when I click on add person. It adds it to the array list, and then after adding it to the array list, we call this method, and that method is now setting it to that text view as soon as we click on it. So Chuck Norris has been added. We can also go and say, let's say John Rambo, say add person there. If I click on add person, that one was also added there. So this set text to text view will basically run through the array list on the persons or the people that you added, and then add them to this text view. So that's not really what we want here. We want to save that person to a file, not just showing it on the screen. So let's do the next part where we'll save the person to a text file. So go into your save button, which is this one, and let's see how we're going to do this. We'll start off with a try and a catch block, because there could be an exception that occur when you try to open a file and that file doesn't exist and you need to write to it. There could be some exception that maybe the storage is full or whatever. So we're going to use the catch block there with an input output exception. Now it's red at this stage because we haven't done anything in the try block that could throw this type of exception. So what we're going to work with here is the file output stream class. We're going to use the file output stream class. You can call it whatever you like, equals open file for output. Now you can see that this file, or the open file output, receives a name for the file and then the mode. So the name for the file must be text, so it's a normal string. So let's call it data.txt. That's the name of the file that we want to write to. And then the second argument will be the mode. And you can see there's a lot of modes here that we can use, but the one that they recommend is mode private, which means that this file will be created on your phone and only your own application has got access to it. Now for the next line, we're going to use the output stream writer class. And let's call this one output file equals new output stream writer. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass this file object now that's got a link to my new file that will be created, and we're going to pass it into this output stream writer. So the output stream writer class is the class that's got all the methods for us to write to a file, and some other methods also. But this file output stream makes the connection to the file. This one writes to the file. So we need both of them. Now let's go into the for loop again. Integer I equals 0, I less than, again, people.size, and then we'll say I plus plus. Right, so we are running through the array list again because we want to write now everything that's in the array list to this file called data.txt. So we will just use this output file object, this one, the output stream writer object, and we're going to call the write method, and that writes to the screen. Now it's not writing a new line, it will just keep on writing. So we need to add a new line character if we want to go to a new line in the file. So we're going to start with going through every single object in this array list, starting at I, where we are currently in the for loop. So we're going to get the object and then call getName. So now we're going to write the guy's name to the file, and then I want to add a comma there, and then let's get people.getI again, .get the surname. So we'll have the name, a comma, and the surname, and then I'm going to go to a new line. And that means that every single person object inside of this array list, its name, comma, and surname will be printed to the file, and then a new line character, which means it's going to go to the new line. Now when we're done with this for loop, we know that everything in the people array list has now been written to this file called data.txt, and now we need to close the file. So the first thing we're going to do here is to say output file.flush. So this flush method now flushes, makes sure basically that everything is written to the file before we actually close it. So we're going to say output file.close, and that closes the file. So when working with files, there we open up the file, there we write to the file, and then we close the file again or save it. And now after this, we can show a toast to the user and say successfully saved. And now we know everything's successfully done, the user knows what's going on, and then we can also have a toast message here that just show this message there. So you can call e.getMessage. If there's an exception that occurs, that e object calling getMessage on it will tell me what went wrong. Okay, so there's the try and the catch block. In the try block, we open up the file, we write to the file, we close the file, and we notify the user. So right now, if we run it, you won't really see anything happening because this happens now in the background. The user will only see successfully saved and not really know whether it's been saved unless we can show him the data that has been saved. So for this, we're going to have a method called load data. So I'm going to load the data here already. Now that method doesn't exist, that's why it's in red. So right at the beginning of this application, when it starts, we create the people array list, and then we want to load the data that is currently saved in the file, and then we can build on it using the add method. So click on that method, Alt Enter, create the method, and you'll see the method gets created right at the bottom. So now what I like to do when I'm using files, remember files not really used for database type of operations. For that, we're going to do a next series of videos on SQLite, on SQL, and how you handle that. But let's say that you want to use files. Then normally what I do is to just, before I add anything to my array list, I will clear my array list, which means empty it of all objects that's currently in it, and we're loading the data again from the file as if it's new. So we're going to use the file class just to see if this file does exist. So we're going to say file equals get application context dot get file stream path, and the file that we're searching for is data.txt. So basically what we're doing is we're seeing if this file is somewhere, if it is available somewhere on the phone. So the get application context will get the context of this specific application that we're busy with, and for every single application there's some space on the phone where its data gets saved. So by calling get application context, you're getting to that place there, and now you're searching for data.txt if it's there. So if it's there, there will be a file object. So luckily there's a method that we can use to check whether this file now exists or not. So before we get there, I'm going to use another variable there, string line from file, and that line from file will read one line from the file. Okay, so we're going to search for, or just first check if this file exists. So we're going to say if file.exists, then we know the file exists, it's not empty. And the else part will be if the file does not exist. So we can just show a toast here, and we can say something like no data currently in the file. Or let's say in the database. Right, so that's if the file doesn't exist and we cannot read from it, it will say no data currently in the database. So if the file exists, then we can now start reading from it. So to read from it, we're also going to use the try and the catch block. Again, it's going to be IO exception to catch any type of input-output exception that can occur here. Now we're going to use a class called the buffered reader. Buffered reader, call it whatever you want, equals new buffered reader. And now what we want to do in here is to make use of the input stream reader. So we're going to say new input stream reader. And what the input stream reader accepts is the open file input. And the file that we want to check for input is data.txt. Okay, so we're going to use the buffered reader to read. The methods in it, it's going to be used to read, but we need the input stream reader to open up this file for us called data.txt. So now this line there is just to make a connection to that file and see if it exists. Now we make a connection to it so that we can actually start reading from it. So if you try to make this connection and the file doesn't exist, it's going to throw you an exception. So that's why we first check if the file exists, then we can start reading. Right, now what I'm going to do here is to use a while loop, and I'm going to use a double brackets there, and I'm going to explain this now. So we'll have line from file that I declared there at the top should be, so this is how you read now from a file. You're going to say reader.readLine, and that reads one line. This part there reads a line now from the file. And what I'm doing here in the while loop, I'm saying that this line from the file that's been read now should be saved into line from file, and then I will test if that value is equal to null. So all in one line. This reads the line from the file, it saves it into the variable line from file, and this while loop is now testing while this line from file is not equal to null. So if it's not null, it means there is something in that line from the file, and we can process that line from the file. If it's not, if there's nothing in there, that value will be null, and then the while loop will stop. Okay, so let's get into the while loop quickly. Inside of the while loop, I want to make use now of a string tokenizer. So we're going to say string tokenizer tokens equals new string tokenizer. Now let's look at the string tokenizer quickly. So string tokenizer helps us to get tokens from a specific string. So I'm going to have a comment here. Let's say this is the file now. So in your file, you will have, let's say, John, comma, Rambo. On the next line, you'll have Peter, comma, Pollock. On the next line, maybe you will have Chuck, comma, Norris, something like this. So what we want to do is we want to read one line from the file. It won't have those 2 forward slashes. So it will have, let's say, only that John Rambo. We read it from the file, and now we have it saved in line from file. But this is how it looks because we have saved it that way. Where's the save method? Yeah, here's the save method. You can see there we saved the guy's name, then a comma, and then the guy's surname. So it will look like this: name, comma, surname. So now the string tokenizer, what we do is we pass this one line now from the file into the string tokenizer. So it will be, let's say, for example, John, comma, Rambo. And we're going to say that the one thing that separates my data, the delimiter, is the comma. So what we do then, the tokens that we will get out of this, if it sees that line from file is this, and the thing that's separating my data is the comma, then my data that will be returned from the string tokenizer will only be John and Rambo, not the comma. So we do it as follows. We can say person equals new person. So this is creating the new person object now. So when I call tokens.nextToken, it will extract John for me right from the start. If I call tokens.nextToken again, it's going to extract Rambo. And if I call it a third time, it's going to throw an exception because there's not 3 different tokens. Okay, so we're going to have tokens.nextToken for the name. The comma there will be then tokens.nextToken for the surname. So remember, a new person object gets created passing in the name and the surname. So what are we doing here? Tokens.nextToken, the first time you call it will be the guy's name. Doesn't matter in which line you are. That's the first token. If you call tokens.nextToken again, it's the second token, which will be the surname. So now we're creating the name and the surname for a new person. And what we want to do then is to go to our people array list, and we want to add this new person to the array list. So you can see that then, let's say there's 3 lines in the file. This while loop will run 3 times. The first time it runs, it will get John, comma, Rambo. See the delimiter is a comma. Tokens.nextToken will return back John. Tokens.nextToken again will return back Rambo. And that's a new person we add to the array list. The next time it runs, it goes to this line and adds Peter and Pollock. The next time it runs, it goes to this line and it adds Chuck and Norris. And then when it gets back, it sees there's nothing more. It returns a null into line from file, and then the while loop will end. Now, after this while loop, we need to close also the file again. So we're going to say reader.close. And now the file has been closed and we've read everything from the file. So what I want to call then again is that set text to text view method, the one that we did here at the bottom, to run through that every single value inside of the array list and set it to my text view. Right, so this is how we read from a file. We have this line to just make sure that the file exists. But this line is the one that actually makes the connection so that we can start reading from it. And how do you read from it? By calling the readLine method. Now let's just go into the catch block there and show a toast. And the message here will be e.getMessage. And then that will print out that exception for us. Right, so now we have, let me just see this quickly. We've got the load data method there. We have the save method done. So if we want to save to the file, we've done that already. We can add to the array list, and then later on we can save the data. That's been done. There's the array list. There we call load data. So as soon as the application starts, we call load data. There's load data. It will load everything into the people array list. We set the text, and now we can see if this program runs. So let's run this quickly and see how this application executes. Now just remember that we haven't placed any data in a file yet, so we should see that pop up there. No data currently in the database, which is correct. So there's this toast that basically executes when the file doesn't exist. Right, so now let's add something to a file. So I'm going to have Chuck Norris there again. And say add person. You can see it's been added there at the bottom. So now it's in the array list. Let's add Peter Pan there and say add person, and you can see Peter Pan has been added there also. Now if we say save person to file, it's successfully saved those two values now to the file. So if I exit this application now, totally exit it, take it away from memory, go back, and let's say text files video, this one, open up, it will now try and load the data from that text file, and it will say Chuck Norris and Peter Pan already. Okay, so now we can just keep on adding that data. So let's say Peter Pollock, add the person, and we can save again. And again, now everything is saved back to the file again. So I can remove this from memory again, run it again, and it should again give me all that data back. Right, so there you can see everything. Now, another way that you can see that there's data on this application is you can go to settings, and just get settings quickly. There we go. Open up settings, search for apps. There's apps and notifications on this virtual device. Go into app info. Let's just search for this app. It's text files video 2019. There we go. Open it up. Text files video 2019, that's the app that we've got currently. If you go into storage, you will see that there is some user data. The app size is 3.8, there's some user data of 24 kilobytes, and in the cache there's 16. So if I say clear all data there, and I say OK, you will see that the user data is now currently 0. So now if I go out of this application, or out of the settings, and open up my text files video again, you will see that it's empty again. We have removed that text file again. And this is it for writing to files. I hope that you've learned something from this video.